Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the National Capital Planning Commission's November 2nd, 2017 meeting. We have a quorum, and for all gathered, please note that we are being live streamed on the ncpc.gov website. With this quorum, we will proceed with the agenda as has been publicly advertised. Agenda item number 1 is report of the chairman, and I have 3 items. One, longtime member of this commission, Bradley Provencia, who represented the Department of Defense, has retired. Mr. Provencia had 48 years of public service, and we wish him well in his much-deserved retirement. Second, this morning, a number of commission members were able to go to the groundbreaking ceremonies for the Eisenhower Memorial. Ably represented were obviously Gary Partners and AECOM, who have worked hand in glove with our staff for the last number of years. And so we congratulate them on bringing the project to successful design. And we anxiously will eagerly observe the construction of this terrific memorial. Third, I'd note that our fellow commissioner, Mr. Gallus, who is principal with Torty Gallus, they have published their first book entitled Architects of Community, and we congratulate you on that, and it'll shoot to number 1 on Amazon. I'm sure. And then last, I would say our fellow commissioner, Beth White from Houston, may have something to celebrate after last night's World Series win and all that her community has been through over the last few months. So congratulations to Ms. White and to everyone back in Houston. With that, I will agenda item number 2 is the report of the Executive Director, Mr. Acosta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have 2 items to note today. First, the revised submission guidelines and NEPA regulations that this commission adopted took effect on October 30th. After a 30-day posting on the Federal Register. That means that all projects submitted to NCPC will now follow the revised documents, which is your basic guidance for the Commission's review of plans and projects. I'm also pleased to announce that on October 18th, the Committee of 100 on the Federal City presented a vision award to NCPC, the District Office of Planning, as well as General Services Administration for the final score guidelines for the J. Edgar Hoover site. FBI headquarters. The award notes that the guidelines serve as an excellent example of vision, coordinated analysis, and planning for the future use of the FBI site. I'd like to thank our sister agencies and the members of the public who have participated in that effort. Special thanks to Beth Miller and her staff for the very good work on this, as well as our colleagues at the other agencies. And we look forward to continuing this collaboration with the Pennsylvania Avenue Initiative. And that concludes my presentation for today.
Thank you, Mr. Acosta. Any questions for Mr. Acosta? Mr. May.
No questions. I just wanted to commend CCCS on that particular score guidelines.
Just such a difficult task to accomplish, and I just think it's great, and it's great to be recognized for it. So, good job.
Agenda item number 3 is a legislative update. Ms. Schuyler.
Mr. Chairman, I have nothing to report.
Excellent. Agenda item number 4 is the consent calendar. We have 2 items on the consent calendar. Item 4A is for the final site and development plans for guard booth and fence augmentation at the Nebraska Avenue complex, and it is submitted by GSA on behalf of the Department of Homeland Security. Agenda item 4B is for preliminary and final approval of site development plans for a new stormwater management pond at Northwest Branch Park in College Park, Maryland. This project was submitted by the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. Is there a motion? Mr. Cash.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we remove item 4A from the consent calendar and postpone it until the December 7th meeting.
It's been moved and seconded that agenda item number 4A be removed from today's consent calendar and postponed until our December meeting. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Is there all in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed no. And is there a motion on the one remaining item, agenda item number 4B? So the remaining item on the consent calendar has been moved and seconded. All in favor of that, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That is approved. So barreling on to the open session agenda, we have 3 items. Each of these items are simply approval of comments on concept designs. And with we should be able to move through our agenda item today, our open session items fairly expeditiously. The first item is agenda item 5A, and it's approval of comments for revised concept designs for the building exterior, vestibules, and other site improvements at the National Air and Space Museum. And it's brought to us by the Smithsonian Institution. We have visited this a couple of times, I guess, over the last year or so. It's a very exciting project. Ms. Lee, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Before I start my presentation, I want to note that there is an amended EDR in front of you today. We added a note on page 4 in the recommendations, but I will get to it when we cover the water feature portion of the presentation. So Smithsonian has submitted a revised concept design for the terraces, landscape, and security vestibules at the National Air and Space Museum. This submission is part of a larger revitalization project. Since 2014, the Commission has provided feedback on 2 information presentations and 2 concept designs. And as the Chairman mentioned, the Commission has also conducted 3 site visits to the museum. In July 2016, the Commission reviewed the first concept design, which focused on the site improvements and security vestibules. Then, in July 2017, the Commission reviewed a revised concept that analyzed the building exterior stone cladding replacement options. Since the last review, Smithsonian has significantly reduced the project scope due to budget constraints. So today, we will describe the changes on the concept design, and the Smithsonian anticipates to come back for preliminary and final review in February 2018. The project has 6 objectives. First, provide adequate waterproofing and structural support for the building, improve access and visibility between the museum and the National Mall, create a welcoming environment for visitors, provide programming on the museum grounds, reinforce the landscape, and accommodate increased visitation growth. Here is the existing site plan. If you recall, the museum site is approximately 10 acres. The building sits on a terrace surrounded by planters, which respond to topography changes. So the topography of the site generally slopes from southwest here to northeast here. So the southwest is the highest point and is at the same level as the sidewalk, the 7th Street sidewalk, while the northeast corner is the lowest point, and you can see there the terrace is about 6 feet in height. Stairs and ramps provide access to the building from the street level. The building terrace, which you can see highlighted in blue, must be replaced to address waterproofing issues affecting the underground parking. The red dashed line shows the extent of the basement footprint. So here is a diagram of the revised project scope. The blue color represents the extent of the changes to the existing terrace, which now focus on the north and south entrances at the center of the site, and also the west end of the site. The purple color shows the existing areas that will remain. Here is the latest site plan. As you may recall, in July 2016, the Commission commented favorably on a concept design for the landscape and security vestibules. The design still maintains the continuous pedestrian circulation loop around the site, around the building, which you can see here in pink, and also accessible ramps on each side of the central stairs at the building entrances, shown in orange. The design team is now proposing 6 major changes to the previous site plan based on value engineering. The changes include eliminating the fountain of the Delta Solar sculpture, changing the sculpture setting from a wet to a dry plinth, removing the south canopy along Independence Avenue, eliminating the solar panel array from the building's main roof, removing the corner entry plazas, in particular on the east end of the site, increasing the tree spacing, as you can see here, and this results in fewer trees, revising the terrace paving materials. Here is the latest plan. As I mentioned before, the tree spacing has increased from 30 to 45 feet on center to provide better growth conditions and solar access to the ground plane. As such, less trees are proposed in this concept. So now, as I explain the design in more detail, I will share our analysis. The staff analysis has been organized in two main categories: the west end of the site and the overall site. Moving on to the west end of the site, staff finds that the west end of the site, which contains the Delta Solar sculpture, presents a significant opportunity to provide an active plaza space for the 7 million people who visit the museum per year. If successfully designed and programmed, the hardscape plaza could serve as an effective counterpoint to the expansive lawn of the National Mall and contribute to the experience along 7th Street, which directly connects downtown to the waterfront. Here are historic pictures of the west end of the site. Staff notes that the Delta Solar sculpture was originally installed in a shallow reflecting pool on the west end of the museum in 1977, a year after the museum's opening. The pool has not been operational since 1995 due to a leak into the garage below. However, the sculpture maintains its original configuration. The picture on the right is a close-up view of the sculpture setting. The sculpture's stainless steel panels rotate with the wind, and the west orientation relates to the afternoon sun. Therefore, staff finds that the reflection of the sculpture in the water is an integral part of the sculpture composition. The sculpture and its associated water feature contribute to the historic character of the museum and the National Mall. Here you can see pictures of existing conditions. You can see the empty, shallow pool. Staff notes that the July 2016 concept design, shown on the bottom left, included the relocation of the Delta Solar sculpture closer to the corner of Independence Avenue and 7th Street. The proposal included the replacement of the shallow pool with a plinth that had a similar proportion to the original pool. The plinth functioned as a water feature and an integrated perimeter security measure for the base of the sculpture. The picture on the bottom right shows the current design. As you can see, the water feature has been eliminated, but the proposed plinth remains in the same location as the previous design. Here is an enlarged plan of the proposed design. In general, the plan includes a new hardscape plaza surrounding the sculpture, as you can see here, 3 seat walls around the sculpture, shades, a low wall separating here the plaza and the existing large exhibit area. It's a loading area for the museum. And you can also see the existing growth of trees to the north of the Delta Solar sculpture. Here there is a section through the proposed plinth, the adjacent plaza here, and the loading area for large exhibits. As you can see, the plinth will be 36 inches tall along 7th Street here for perimeter security purposes and 46 inches in here along the plaza. This is to respond to topography changes while maintaining a flat surface for the sculpture. The plinth will be clad in black granite with a reflective finish. Here is the proposed rendering of the southwest corner. Staff does not support the revised configuration of the Delta Solar, consisting of a dry plinth without a water feature as the sculpture base, because this setting does not create a welcoming entry to the museum or a usable plaza, and it negatively impacts the integrity of the sculpture. Staff also notes that since the project submission to NCPC and the Commission of Fine Arts review 2 weeks ago, the Smithsonian has committed to retaining a water feature for the Delta Solar, which will be incorporated into the preliminary and final design. I note that we have reflected this change on page 4 in the amended EDR. However, staff's recommendation regarding the design of the plaza is still relevant. Staff recommends that the Smithsonian consider how this portion of the site could reinforce the network of active gathering spaces along 7th Street and provide an amenity for the visitors of the museum. Here are some inspirational images of successful public spaces. We request that the Smithsonian submit a revised design for the West End Plaza that incorporates the following: a water feature that operates year-round and maintains the relationship with the Delta Solar, programming for outdoor events and passive recreation, benches, food vendors, movable tables and chairs, low-impact paths within the existing grove of trees, permeable pavers, night views of the southwest corner, and interpretive signage for the Delta Solar. We also recommend an integrated public space that incorporates the adjacent large exhibit access area, which is here, as part of the plaza composition, as indicated in red. Staff also recommends the Smithsonian evaluate the perimeter security along 7th Street at this edge to allow greater accessibility and visibility into the plaza and integrate elements that also function as public amenities. Moving on to the overall site. As you may recall from previous site visits, there is a lack of seating around the perimeter of the site and not enough bike racks. As the design develops, staff requests a streetscape plan that incorporates the following amenities: benches located near bus stops, building entrances, and terrace corners at the sidewalk and terrace levels, bike facilities such as bicycle racks and a Capitol bike share station. Staff also recommends that the Smithsonian work with the National Park Service to improve the streetscape surrounding the museum consistent with the National Mall Streetscape Manual where applicable. The proposed design relocates the Ad Astra sculpture further to the north towards Jefferson Drive. The stairs will move further to the north to align with the existing terrace walls, and staff recommends that Smithsonian coordinate with NPS regarding the relocation of the Ad Astra sculpture to the sidewalk space along Jefferson Drive and ensure that the placement of the sculpture does not disrupt pedestrian flow and provides sufficient clearance for bus drop-off and pickup areas. Regarding landscape, staff notes that all paving, soil, and systems need to be removed to replace the terrace roof waterproof membrane. 147 of the 151 existing trees will be removed. 4 trees will remain. These 4 trees are highlighted in red and are located on the east and west end of the site, outside of the basement footprint. The proposal includes planting 116 new trees, in addition to the 4 trees that will remain. This is 31 trees less than what currently exists today. Therefore, staff requests that the Smithsonian submit landscape plans at preliminary review that include tree replacement to prevent net loss of tree canopy in accordance with the procedure established in the policies related to tree canopy and vegetation in the comprehensive plan for the National Capital. In terms of paving treatment, the design team has revised the terrace paving material from granite pavers to exposed aggregate concrete to the areas shown in light gray. The dark gray shown at the museum entrances will continue to be granite. You can see an enlarged plan of the proposed pavement treatment. I think it's frozen. Okay, thanks. So moving on to the security vestibules, overall, the north canopy continues to have the same form and materials. And the Smithsonian has provided an updated lighting approach that respects the Capitol at night. You recall the last concept included a canopy on the south side of the museum. To accommodate the canopy, the Smithsonian removed the existing continuum sculpture which was placed there in 1976. The design no longer includes the canopy. And the design team is proposing to keep the continuum sculpture at the south entrance, but slightly relocate it to the center of the building. You can see that in the existing conditions, the sculpture is off-center and it approximately aligns with 6th Street. Lastly, the current design eliminates the solar panels previously proposed on the building roof due to the potential impacts to the building structure and associated cost implications. To conclude, it is the Executive Director recommendation that the Commission provide the comments discussed throughout the presentation, including those related to the Delta Solar sculpture and improving the plaza at 7th Street and Independence Avenue, by incorporating additional site amenities, a year-round water feature, and expanding the plaza to incorporate the adjacent exhibit access area. Notes that since the project submission to NCPC and CFA's review on October 19, 2017, Smithsonian has committed to retaining a water feature for Delta Solar, which will be incorporated into the preliminary and final design. Regarding the overall site, request a streetscape plan that incorporates site amenities such as benches and bicycle racks. Recommend that Smithsonian coordinate with NPS to improve the streetscape surrounding the museum and the relocation of Ad Astra. Request Smithsonian submit landscape plans that include tree replacement to prevent net loss of tree canopy in accordance with the procedures of the comprehensive plan. And with this, I conclude my presentation. I'm available for questions the Commission may have, and the design team and Smithsonian is here. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Lee, very much. Are there questions or comments? We note that Ms. Trowbridge and her team are here, and I would hasten to remind you that there is, as Ms. Lee noted, an addendum to the page 4. Mr. Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on the solar panels. So is there a way for us to sort of approve them, and then if you don't use them, they're still approved if you ever want to use them? Like, I'm just, like, to me, with administration priorities around these things, and, it just seems like it would be something you'd want to have approval for at some point in the future, and the idea of coming back to us to approve something that you could have had approved already. Does this make sense? Okay, I'm saying that keep the authorization if you can. I mean, so I'm sort of concerned about, even if you don't build it, you could have built it, and we knew you could have built it, so can we keep you keeping the chance to build it?
Can we give you more flexibility?
That was a very nice way of saying it.
Please allow us.
That's why you're...
Good afternoon, Commissioners. We
You
want
want to introduce yourself just for the record.
I'm Ann Trowbridge
Yeah, thank
from
you.
Smithsonian Facilities. This is Colin McKillop from Quinn Evans Architects. We did want to do the solar panels on the roof. However, in evaluating roof systems as we got into our construction documents, we wanted the very best roofing system in terms of the membrane to protect our collections. And that choice was not compatible with having the solar panels without totally redoing the structure all the way down to the foundation. So we had
Structural
to
issue.
make the choice to protect the collections with the better roof. And I don't know, Colin, if you can add to that?
Sure. The reason why the roof membrane ties in with the installation of the proposed photovoltaics is we had proposed a single-ply PVC membrane, which would allow the brackets which support the PV panels to be simply just bonded right to the membrane itself. But because it's single-ply, there's concern that's not durable enough. When we shifted to a mod bit roof with greater durability, that prevents that bonding detail to work. So we would have to fasten the bracket down, which had an estimated number of 90,000 screw fastener penetrations. Any kind of ballasted roof, similar to the African American History and Culture Center, would require significant upgrade to the structure. The existing structure is lightweight and not designed to support any such load.
So what I'm hearing is that while you are grateful for our offer of flexibility, you're likely not to be able to implement it? Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah. Does that change your suggestion, Mr. Shaw? Or?
What if technology changes and they're not as heavy?
Yeah,
Can I jump in? So as the proud owner of a house with a mod bit roof and solar panels, it is possible. I mean, I know you have the issue of penetrations, but did you look at the possibility of actually having the structure that supports the solar panels span from parapet walls? Because it looks like there are some kind of parapet walls there.
Well, what we looked at was dunnage that would be supported by the trusses below. In terms of spanning from one end to the other, that would lift it up above the parapets. When we had dunnage at an earlier presentation, that allowed the sight lines to be maintained by keeping the top of the panels below the parapet. We would be interested to accept a pre-approval to allow for that to be explored later, but at this time, it's not being pursued due to the reasons we've referenced.
Okay. They save a lot of money in the long run.
The cost of the investment would not provide a return on investment for the life of the installation.
Oh, okay, well, that's not so good.
Oh, thank you. Then, if we're done with solar, I don't want to interrupt that, but I wanted to move on to actually to the removal of the canopy at the south entrance, because my comment is I find that very disappointing, especially in light of this morning. A lot of us were just at the groundbreaking on the Eisenhower, which is across the street. Included in that on how much else is happening in Southwest. I am down there all the time. It's hard ever to not see somebody lining up to get into that entrance. I don't know all the facility requirements, but it seems to me of having a secondary entrance might be very important. Having that cover, as was described, as I recall in the presentation, was to allow for basic weather covering, but also I think this announces it so well. I mean, so much on Independence Avenue and the Smithsonian's and other institutions along the avenue are waking up to the fact that there's a rest of a city here that they can connect to, and that there's a reason to connect to it for all of our sakes. Taking this away, to me, put it back into, we've got a back door, and we're all faced on the mall, and that's really our importance. So I don't know what we can do at this point, but I would urge strongly to reconsider this as a valuable VE item, because I think it adds so much to the fabric of what you're really trying to do, and that's bring people in and out of the building and around the building with ease. So that's my comment.
Can I add to that? Thank you. Commissioner Griffiths, I totally agree with you. I was heartened to see the addition of the water back to the art on 7th Street, but I was convinced when we went on the original tour and so forth that this was something that was going to provide function as well as beauty, and fell in love with it. And when I see the one to the north, which is also very beautiful, but has limited function because there's no sun from the north. And so this is the one that would seem to have been saved over the other if you're choosing based on budgetary constraints.
Ms. Trowbridge?
First of all, we would like to maintain approval of the south canopy in the event that we could bring that back at a later date in the future.
Now you want our flexibility.
But we would like that flexibility, and particularly if there's ever, the public authorities ever decide to widen the sidewalks at Independence, that would allow a little more space for canopies and visitor amenity on that side. There is sunlight, quite a bit of sunlight on the north side, particularly in the summer months when the sun swings around. Roger has done extensive sunlight charts for his plant life, and it's hot on both sides. The majority of visitors do enter from the mall side, so that is favored, and that is where we wanted to bring the vestibule out from the building to both improve the security as well as to have that process occur before you entered the Milestones of Space gallery, where many of our most precious artifacts are displayed.
Can I comment?
I just had a quick follow-up question because I wasn't understanding what the width of the sidewalk had to do with this entrance.
Well, the whole sidewalk on the south side is a bit cramped
Yeah,
between all
no question.
perimeter security, the curb ramps, our perimeter security walls, and all the buses dropping off. It's tight. It would really benefit in the long run if we had more sidewalk, less Independence Avenue roadway.
What would that get us, a canopy?
It would make more space for that to occur in a less cramped fashion, I think, from a design standpoint
Okay.
in the future. That would be my desire.
Mr. Gauss?
Yeah, so I'm sure that the north side gets some sunlight. That's true. However, it would be difficult to argue that the south gets less sunlight than the north. And I actually went through that door this morning at 11 o'clock, and it was hot. It was intense. And the more, the higher temperatures and the more intense sunlight would come during the hours hitting the southern exposure than the northern exposure. If my science classes taught me something in
Right.
those days.
Right.
I also understood that this was a budgetary issue and not all the things that you mentioned.
Oh, it's
Ms. Trowbridge.
definitely a budgetary issue.
Okay, but you mentioned the sidewalk, you
Well,
mentioned
I'm
the
saying
front
that
door.
a
You
future
didn't mention-
canopy could be better with a wider sidewalk.
But that's really not our question. Our
right.
question is why not the south instead of the north? That's the
The
question.
north is mainly, has canopy, but the main function of the north is to create an outboard vestibule. The enclosure with the security screening equipment, that structure is mainly that. It has wings that also provide shade for people waiting outside, but that is a different kind of structure than this one. And it has that purpose of getting the potential hazardous materials away from the collections and the public inside, and also allowing a better visitor experience of going through that screening process before you're actually in the main gallery.
I guess I would say your sales from the last time you were here was much better than they are today. Because I was so enamored by the reason behind the south one in particular.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, in a large project as we have with a limit on federal funding, we have to make choices. And some choices are things like a south canopy that you could come back and do in the future. Other choices, if you don't do them now, you can never come back. So that's part of our decision-making in how we approach the necessary alignment of scope and budget.
So a question on the EDR. Ms. Trowbridge would like to maintain flexibility to do the vestibule, to do that on the south side. Does the EDR have to be amended to request or recommend, or is there anything in here prohibiting?
Encourage.
Yeah.
I think it would be desirable to amend, and if I could suggest.
Yep, please.
That you could request that the Smithsonian retain the south entrance canopy as a desirable option if future funding permits.
Ms. Trowbridge, is that
That sounds acceptable.
agreeable? Is it, Mr. Shaw?
Oh, yeah, so.
All right, let's park that for the moment, or, okay, Mr. Shaw?
And so, how are you doing? I believe in flexibility, but I'm also thinking about you're coming to us for the South Campus, for the castle, for the Smithsonian, and just to me, to miss the opportunity to have these grand entrances, and we've been talking about that for the South Campus master plan for Smithsonian Castle, that we just need to start looking at these moments. This is one of those times where I'm thinking we're being short-sighted and not seeing the collection of moments on the South now that are going to build this up. And I just want to reiterate one more time, and we've shared this before, that majority of our population now, with the wharf now officially being open, is going to be sort of south of the mall now, and how we start to have an orientation that this is a amenity for the residents that live in southwest of the district. And so I just, want to strongly encourage again and hope we can find the funding because this really adds to a lot of the other things you're asking us to think about right now and really meets the needs, I think, of district residents in terms of both design and accommodation.
Yes. Although I would note that in our total visitation, local regional visitors are about 15%, about 75% of Smithsonian visitors are from further places in the U.S. and about 10% are international. So that there will be a big increase in the visitors to the south, but within the grand picture of where our visitors come from, it's a big increase in the smaller percentage.
Ms. White?
So help us understand the choices you had to make, because we don't want to see the value engineer out the value of the public space. And there will be a lot of hotel rooms to the south as well. So when you say you had to make these choices, just help us understand how this was eliminated.
I may call on my colleagues here who are more involved. I have to say that this project started out as a mechanical and building systems replacement project. And that is what it still is in its essence.
But a scope
What
creep.
happened, though, is because the design of the museum, the return air plenums go up the exterior wall, and they were right behind that falling off deteriorated cladding, we had to do the cladding and the systems together. So although when you bring the pieces of the project that come to NCPC here, it looks like a grand exterior streetscape, public amenity project. It's really about better protection for the collections, better visitor conditions inside in terms of, sustainable mechanical systems, better security, a whole litany of things. So the value engineering process that we go through is across all of these things, including many, many things that you don't see and that I don't even know much about. But Mike Henry from our design team our design management team at Smithsonian is here if you'd like to know a little bit more about the grand scope of the changes across the board that are really, I think, an expected level of change in a project this large.
Good afternoon. There is a whole extended process, a decision process that involves scores of people in order to rank the priorities of the various aspects of the project that were evaluated. And as Anne adeptly put, the heart of this project is an HVAC system replacement. We had no intentions of replacing the envelope. And so one thing leads to another. You get to a scale of project where we now have to look at all the codes and the code improvements. So obviously code takes priority. Anything that affects the main purpose of the project was a main priority. And as this was a feature that would, in all intents and purposes, the museum really did want to keep it. There's a number of us that did want to keep it, but when ranked against the other aspects of the project that pertain to code and use and sustainability, it did not rise to that level of muster for inclusion with the project. It does remain as an option in the design. So it is something that will get priced when we provide it to the contractor. However, its award is, unless somebody comes and gives a donation or the Congress feels exceptionally generous toward our project, the likelihood of its award is very reduced.
That's a shame. I just have to add my voice to the chorus. That's a shame because I just think this design is it was so difficult to get right, and you nailed it. And it's a shame. Yeah, the elevation shots are just magnificent. It's too bad. And if you could get, a special fundraising effort just for the South Pavilion, that would be a winner. So I hope you do, because I think it's a real loss. Not just for the aesthetics, obviously. And I take your point about the southern entrance. So pity those poor people coming in from wherever they come from in August through the South and waiting. And as a final thing, the other piece of it is that it's a shame not to have it when the Eisenhower Memorial is going up across the street, because I think they would complement each other nicely.
Other questions or comments? So, Ms. Coster, you want to repeat the proposed amendment for the Mina Wright Memorial Southern Entrance?
Okay, I thought that might have been the Jeff.
Yeah.
Not so fast, President Memorial.
Strike Memorial.
Request that the Smithsonian Institution retain the south entrance canopy as a desirable option if future funding permits.
I think Ms. Trowbridge is fine with that. Is there a motion on that amendment?
I would move for that.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of that amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That's adopted. So the question now is on the EDR as amended. Is there a motion on the EDR as amended?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of the EDR as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Trowbridge and your team. Agenda item 5B is approval of comments on the concept design for the 11th Street Bridge Park submitted by the District Department of Transportation. And Mr. Fliss is with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the Commission. The District Department of Transportation has submitted concept plans for the proposed 11th Street Bridge Park. This is for your review and comment. You recall that the project came before you in the spring of 2016 as an information presentation. They are back here again and have since that time been further developing the details of the park design. So just as a reminder, the park is going to be located in southeast Washington, D.C. It's highlighted here, circled in yellow. This is immediately south of the Navy Yard and just north of Anacostia Park, which is controlled by the National Park Service, as well as historic Anacostia. The project goal seeks to reuse the existing piers from the old 11th Street Bridge, which cross the Anacostia River at this location, and create a new civic destination in a park that connects the surrounding communities. So just by way of history, the Commission in 2011 approved the final design for the replacement of the old 11th Street Bridge. That project replaced a pair of 40-year-old bridges which crossed in this location to allow for safety enhancements and new ramp structures. And you can see here the plans for that project which the Commission approved. So on the left here on the screen, you can see that old configuration, and then on the right, the new bridge configuration, which has since been built and is operational. And the old downstream bridge infrastructure, circled in red here, is the site of the proposed bridge park. And this view from the river shore, and this is the Anacostia Park, you can see the existing piers. They're highlighted in red. Following the information presentation which you heard, the project team conducted a feasibility study to further the design and also evaluate those existing piers. And through that study, DDOT found that the piers were in good condition. However, the loading demands expected by the initial design exceeded their capacity. And so as a result, the park design has been modified due to these changes, but also as the project program and other needs have been identified and developed. The proposed park, just to give you some context, will be accessible via a variety of different transportation modes. The Anacostia and Navy Yard metro stations are both about a 20-minute walk. Of course, bus service is pretty frequent in this area as well. No new parking will be provided for the park. However, there are several parking garages in the area, including the Anacostia metro station, which is to the southwest. The park has 4 goals, which you heard previously: creating a healthy community by establishing a safe place for residents to exercise and play, connecting the community to the Anacostia River, connecting the neighborhoods of Anacostia, Fairlawn, Capitol Hill, and Navy Yard, and also generating new jobs and economic activity. From the beginning, community engagement and feedback has been a critical part of the design process in developing principles and programming concepts. The Bridge Park, therefore, symbolizes a new connection across the river, stitching together booming areas of the city and those that had been previously overlooked. The park is also an example of the city working together with residents to create this new vision. So through the engagement process, a number of proposed uses were identified, and these are listed here on the screen in front of you. And these have been incorporated into the park design, including outdoor performance spaces, public art, playgrounds, urban agriculture, and classrooms. In March of 2014, the 11th Street Bridge Park staff organized a nationwide competition, which was in part informed by those over 400 community meetings. Over 80 designs firms were submitted proposals, and after several months of the selection process, the competition jury selected the design by OMA and Olin. This winning team captured ideas from the residents on both sides of the river to create a literal X intersection, creating a dynamic and multi-layered amenity for both sides of the river. And so here on the screen, you can see the kind of concept on the top left and also a rendering of that winning design. So as I mentioned, the project team conducted a feasibility study of that winning entry and has further evaluated the existing piers. The resulting design, which I'll walk you through today, is substantially similar to the original concept, with the major project components retained, but the design has been slightly modified. So for comparison, I'll walk you through a few slides. First, an aerial view of the winning design. And then here's the current design. So you can see the bridge has been narrowed somewhat. So here's a rendering of that winning design, looking basically to the north. And then here again is the new design, again very close to the winning entry, just narrowed slightly. Here's a view looking from Anacostia Drive to the north. And then here's the updated concept, which is before you today. Again, based upon that feasibility study, a new multi-column pier as well as 2 additional support columns have been added to the bridge structure to help support the overall program. So walking quickly through the components of the plan, I'm going to start at the roof level. This includes gardens, lookout areas, as well as open gathering spaces. The bridge deck level will incorporate an amphitheater, cafe, and play space. And then at the pier level, where it interfaces with the ground, the park will include park space, an education center, outdoor classroom, as well as a kayak launch area. The revised design concept also further promotes pedestrian and bicycle access. From the north side, pedestrians will access the bridge from the landing adjacent to the Navy Yard, as well as the existing 11th Street Bridge. On the south side, the bridge connects to the adjacent grade, and paths and ramps allow access down to Anacostia Drive, Good Hope Road, and Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. And on the screen here, you can see highlighted in green those access routes. Staff believes both the north and south bridge landings are critically important to allowing access to the park. These connections should be clear, safe, and comfortable for all park users. We understand that the applicant is going to continue to develop the details for these connections prior to preliminary and final review by the Commission. In particular, the pedestrian bicycle connections from the bridge across Anacostia Drive in that area should be improved, as the trail is located north of a road and would require a crosswalk at grade. Because the bridge is elevated, another important issue is protection from the sun. The team has therefore emphasized a shaded route across the bridge, including both built elements as well as landscape features to provide that path. Through bicycle access will be primarily along the existing 11th Street Bridge, which is on the kind of the top part of the image, although a shared bicycle pedestrian path will allow direct access to bridge programming. Connections will allow both bicycles and pedestrians to cross over from the existing bridge to the bridge park. And here's another view that shows those connections. So the grades have been reconciled at these locations to allow that interface to happen. In addition, the design has been updated to provide clear routes for emergency egress and life safety, and those are diagrammed here. Again, these are the additional kind of program analysis that's happened since you last reviewed the project. Other details continue to be developed, including the stormwater management strategy shown here, which will include cisterns and green roof areas. And the palette of landscape and built materials across the park will also reflect the surrounding context, including both river and meadow plantings. Finally, as the design is further developed, additional information regarding the proposed lighting strategy will be particularly important. The bridge will be seen from a variety of locations at some distance, and as such, the lighting level should be appropriate to meet the design needs while minimizing excess light, as well as upward and horizontal light spillage. As such, staff recommends the applicant prepare a lighting plan, including fixture details, color, illumination, and renderings for inclusion in the next submission. The proposed bridge park intends to create a welcoming and vibrant space that enhances the user experience and fosters civic and local uses. Staff finds that this is consistent with many of the policies in the comprehensive plan. Further, a high-quality public realm will reinforce Washington's national image, as well as everyday experiences for residents and visitors. The park will also promote waterfront access and highlight the Anacostia River's recreational, ecological, and scenic qualities. I'll also note that the Frederick Douglass Memorial Bridge, also known as the South Capitol Bridge, is located less than a mile downstream. It is also going to be rebuilt with a new contemporary design. Both these bridges reflect a renewed emphasis on Washington, D.C. as a riverfront city. Finally, the project team has coordinated with a number of federal and local agencies, as well as the surrounding communities. Staff commends this outreach thus far and suggests those efforts continue as the project advances. We do recommend further coordination with the Department of Navy regarding any security impacts to the Washington Navy Yard on the north. And on the south end, the applicant should continue coordinating with the National Park Service on elements within and adjacent to Anacostia Park, including the pedestrian and bicycle connections, which I had mentioned earlier in the presentation. I'll also note that the applicant is still refining the limits of the project, and if any transfers of jurisdiction are necessary between the Park Service and the district, those will need to come back before the Commission for review and approval. Therefore, it is the Executive Director's recommendation that the Commission comments favorably on the proposed 11th Street Bridge Park, noting that the park will increase community connectivity and create welcoming and vibrant spaces that enhance the user experience and foster civic and local experiences. Recommends the applicant prepare a lighting plan, including fixture details, color, and illumination levels. Requests the applicant continue to coordinate with the Department of Navy and the National Park Service, and notes that any transfers of jurisdiction from federal to district control will require review and approval by the Commission. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and we have representatives from the project team who are here as well.
Thank you, Mr. Fliss. A very exciting project. Mr. Griffiths?
Thank you. If I could start, I had one technical question. On the existing bridge, there's overlooks. You have a picture of it in like slide 6 or whatever it is, where you can actually walk out. What happens to those? Do they connect into the new? I wasn't clear on that.
I believe they're actually removed as part of the project, so they're going to be. There will be new overlooks, but the existing ones are removed to allow the new structure.
Yeah, I figured it was taken into account. Secondly, I think the lighting is critically important, and I absolutely would support no restrictions whatsoever. Just go crazy, because people ought to be able to see this thing. And I have found in some recent experience that perhaps our controlling committees and jurisdictions, how do I say, shed a dim light on illuminating structures, which actually I think, yeah. So anyway, I think there's been success, and I think the little bit of success is going to show by the time you get the lighting happening here. I think it should be dynamic and exciting. First of all, I think this is a great project. So don't take my next comments that seriously or with substance, except that I have questions about what this is connecting. I enjoy, and I've been following this for a long time, the purpose of connecting communities, and certainly, literally, it's a bridge across the river that's connecting two. But I look at the starting point on one side and the starting point and ending point on the other side, and I'm wondering how you get into the community. So, what is the thought getting up to MLK and Good Hope right now? I see the paths. It's a bit of a walk, and you're going underneath the highway. Is there animation, or was there any thought of how to, or is that phase 2? And then on the other side, it's adjacent to a federal facility that has no public entrance or exit. It's a long walk to connect to any other established area, or actually what I see as a developing area.
Well, I'll start, and I know the project team can certainly jump in. There are certainly a number of challenges. I know on the north side, it is adjacent to the 11th Street, the existing bridge, as well as the Navy Yard. The project team, I know DDOT has been working with the Navy Yard to do some installations, art installations, so it helps to activate that space and creates the option to walk down that location. The same thing on the south side. I know the National Park Service has recently worked to do some art installations, so at least it makes pedestrians aware that there's activities on that side. Part of the development with the concept was actually to create these new paths, which are on grade. It's a sloped grade, but it is out from underneath the bridge. So you will have access from Good Hope Road through these open paths.
My colleague made a comment right now that this is I don't know if you mind me saying, but it's a destination park, and I totally agree. It's different than one of the analogies of other kind of parks like this that have been made in other cities. This is going to be different. This is unique. It's destination. So my concern is, wanting it to be successful, is if it's destination, how do you get people there?
Mr. Shaw.
And
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah.
If I can chime in. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Scott Kratz. I'm the director of the 11th Street Bridge Park, a project of the East of the River nonprofit building bridges across the river. And access is critically important. You're absolutely right. It's something that we've been thinking about from the beginning. Even before we did the design competition, we actually worked with for an entire semester, some graduate urban planning students from Virginia Tech to do an entire 3-month-long walkability and accessibility study, and they identified some real key challenges. We have created some pretty amazing barriers between humans and the waterfront over the last 30 or 40 years. And I'll answer that question 2 ways. First, let me talk about the barriers and then where we see the direct access points can be, and I'll answer that directly. Matt mentioned the several interventions that we've been working on over the last 12, 24 months to try and use public art to provide little cookie crumbs to get people down. That's not going to solve everything, but we've installed 3 different works of art. One, we've been working with the U.S. Navy Museum to install giant 15-foot-long historic images from the Navy the up 11th Street that, frankly, I think is the most challenging space because you're wedged between a security wall and a freeway on-ramp. It's not the most pedestrian-friendly existence. Two, we've been working with the National Park Service and East of the River artists and students from Ballou High School in Ward 8 and Eastern High School in Ward 6 to install a series of the 4 giant art installations along the Anacostia River Trail in Anacostia Park. Again, that isn't going to solve everything, but it makes a little bit more of a destination. The most important we actually just unveiled last month, and that's a collaboration that we had with the East of the River Anacostia Art Center. entrance coming down Good Hope Road underneath the 295 underpass is an incredibly dark, frightening, grim, I think is probably the best word for it, the experience. And we worked with DDOT to install these giant lighted art installations that are under there. It's 90 feet of linear art that's lit that will actually feature East of the River artists. And the first artist is an East of the River artist from Ward 7 who's been taking images of the Anacostia River for the last 20, 30 years. So to answer your question directly, 4 points of access. One is you're coming down 11th Street, as we mentioned, and hopefully that art should at least help that effort. Two is the river walk on the west side of the river, that connects in front of, actually on the west side of the river, in front of the Navy Yard. That's about a 5-minute walk to Yards Park, in the booming area down by the Navy Yard. Three is it connects into Anacostia Park, as Matt mentioned, both along the Anacostia River Trail, that now I should mention connects all the way up to Bladensburg, just opened up last year. And four, most importantly, I think, since we're connecting to the 11th Street local bridge, we're connecting to that 16-foot wide pedestrian and bike path. And that bike path goes over the tangled spaghetti mess of the 295 freeway and actually enters at the corner of Good Hope and MLK. Right, so that we see as a key entrance point into the heart of historic Anacostia. It was a long answer, but it was a really important question.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, first of all, Scott, we've been working, Scott, you may want to come forward with Scott for, I guess, since the beginning is at the Anacostia Coordinating Council for 5 years. And he knows that I've talked to him pretty candidly about it. I think this is a exciting magnet for resources and focus. And we wish him well, and I wish him well. They've been engaged in trying to be supportive and been supportive. He also knows that I have a big concern. I tried to get the commission involved in many ways, and members of the commission, in trying to focus at the green space below the park itself and trying to find ways to make it more accessible to the community east of the river. Through some bridges into underpass and realigning the parking, the drive space, raising some of the barriers of the water so it would be better for limit flooding, unveiling some of the hidden streams that are in the park now, things that would make it an attractive draw for our community, connect to our community, and also connect to the other community across the river and be a draw for it. I just hope, and I've said this to Scott, that and I want to ask him, maybe want to speak to it, how the things he's doing, which are not really the bridge, but are coming from the bridge magnet and direction to do things on our side of the river, because that's my real concern. Frankly, I would like to see the kind of resources that you can raise and can be raised to affect the green space, the park itself, more than anything else. So maybe you may share some of the land issues you're working on, that kind of thing that I think are good and come out of this. And as one of the commissioners and I spoke with just a moment ago says, it can be not an and, but an or not an or, but an and. And I would like to see an and of this, not just an or, this, not the park itself. But you may want to share what you've done with that, please.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Dixon. And thank you for being part of this. I think it was 5 years ago when we were, you came into a workshop that we were doing with local youth before we even did the design competition to design the park when we first met.
Right.
So I think what you're getting at, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what's been really important from the beginning is that we're investing not only in this park, but we're investing in the broader community, right? We know that every program element has been designed by the community. Even the design team was selected in part by a larger group of community stakeholders. But we know that these kind of big destination parks, I think that were mentioned, will be an amazing amenity for the community, but also can have intended and unintended consequences. How do we make sure that the tens of thousands of people who've helped shape this project from the beginning can continue to stay and thrive in place, right? Particularly east of the river in your community in Ward 8. So we've worked with the community to design, and many stakeholders of which I know you've participated in, a larger equitable development plan that has 19 recommendations in 3 different categories: workforce development, that I know is close to your heart, Arrington, the affordable housing and small business enterprises, I won't go through all of those 19 recommendations, but we're standing up a community land trust the east of the river. How do we make sure we're collecting and holding deed-restricted land now so that residents can stay and thrive in place? We've started a East of the River Homebuyers Club, a Ward 8 Homebuyers Club that's seen 160 participants, 53 of which, Ward 8 residents, are now homeowners because of that larger effort. How do we spend the next, if we're 2-3 years away from opening, or if we're a couple years away from construction, how do we make sure that we're spending the time and resources making sure the residents around the park have the capacity and skill set to apply for and succeed at construction jobs and then post-occupancy? I'm happy to report that from the beginning, LISC DC, CDFI, that's been active in the community, helped us with developing our equitable development plan. And when we announced those recommendations almost a couple years ago, they said they wanted to help and do more. And it was our honor to stand on stage with them last year as they made a $50 million commitment, 5-0, into the 1 mile area around the Bridge Park. We've since announced an additional $5 million investment from JP Morgan Chase to invest in the community land trust, small business enterprises east of the river, as well as workforce development strategies. So this has become much more than a park, but this has become a larger convener to draw resources to make sure those residents can stay and thrive in place.
Yeah, I think that I wanted to make that part of the record so that as we move forward, we see these things stay in place and still be strengthened by your project. And that's my hope. So it's an and situation, not an or. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Ms. White.
So I have so many comments about this project, but the first is to commend Scott's leadership in driving that very intentional conversation. We've been talking about this for a number of years as well, back when I was in Chicago and since I've been in Houston. And I think about your very astute comments about how do people get to this, and thinking about these big infrastructure reuse projects that start as connectors and then become destinations. This one has the potential to be a destination that will drive investment into communities. It is tough to get around freeways, and believe me, I know that better now, having lived in Houston for a little more than a year, and working on bio-greenways that's going to be a 150-mile system of trails along the bios, getting around railroad bridges and freeways. And I think that this type of destination park, which I think through your programming and activation it will become, will help drive investments in the same way we're seeing in Houston. As each segment of BioTrail comes online, connections begin to form with communities that need to get to the BioTrail. And now we have a plan called Beyond the Bios that's already driving future investment from the $220 million bio-greenway system into these communities. So it does happen. What I think is really unique about this project is Scott's and his team's commitment to learning from these other big infrastructure reuse projects. We're part of a network called the Highline Network, and looking at the Highline in New York and some of the incredible impacts and the well-documented research on the property values that increase when you're next to a well-developed park. That's happened in Chicago and Seattle and places around the country, but it's those unintended consequences, and trying to think about those in advance and making your park system part of the economic driver, and using equity as a theme in this situation, I think, is the leader in the country right now in terms of what you've put in place. So my compliments, and the programming and activation that you're planning to draw people to this site, I think will begin to address the concerns, and very important concerns, about what is this connecting to, how are people getting there. So kudos for the work that you've done. Thank you for being here.
Mr. Chairman, I want to add to what has been just said. We also recognize that this also can be a catalyst for gentrification.
Yep.
And that's what alarms many people in our community. And it also can be a buffer to it, a mitigator, if we can find ways to be sure that the jobs and the training and the opportunities, and I guess that's why I was so concerned about the park itself, where there are many, many job opportunities to work with it and extend it ongoing. And that means jobs so people can afford the housing that is in their community now. And so I think that's we want to make this a mitigator, not a catalyst for gentrification. We know it will come. It needs to come. Diversity is important, and we need it in our community, all over the city, but definitely east of the river. But we want to be sure we try to protect those we can protect and keep them there as long as possible, if not indefinitely.
If I can add one thing to that, I could not agree more. And I think it's important that the nonprofit that's working with the city on this is based east of the river. I think that sends an important message. And we need to practice what we preach. Half of my staff lives east of the river. They're third generation Washingtonians, right, in Ward 7 and Ward 8, and that will continue. So,
thank you, Scott.
Mr. Shaw and then Mr. Gallo.
So, Mr. Chair, I actually want to talk about the design of the surprise. I'm sort of confused because I feel like the integrity of the whole project's a little lost because I'm seeing a whole lot of. It was meant to be built on the existing piers of the 11th Street Bridge, and the design sees the demolition of those piers and the addition of these new columns. And so, at some moment for me, even looking at the design program, if you've sort of told me the integrity of that initial program is lost and we need to look at that, that's fine. But I'm not seeing the integration of the historic piers. That was the original concept. And actually, I'm really concerned now that I'm seeing sort of big, clunky concrete piers going in now on the landing. So I would actually like to talk about the design, if you could do that for me.
Jim Ginther with Whitman Harcourt. So as part of the beginning of the job that we started out with BBAR and DDOT, we took a look at the existing piers, working with Jason and Hallie from OMA and Olin to understand the concept and understand the programming and the loads that were going on to that. First thing we did was do a existing condition of the existing piers, both above and below grade, and did existing research on the existing documents available, particularly the foundations that were out there. As everyone knows, the existing bridge was an existing highway bridge, and one of the big drivers of this project was to not have a consistent width bridge from east to west. It was to have a bridge that varied in width as you came across to the Anacostia Park side. And one of the smallest piers that's out there is Pier 14, which is where we had the 140-foot width that we recommended to reduce to 113. And the biggest reason is that the loads that were on those pilings were upwards of 7 times what they could handle. And that was primarily because of the width of the bridge, the loadings that were going to be necessary to sustain the snow loads and things that you would typically not have on a highway bridge because it's cleared and it's moved from that standpoint. So we worked to understand the materials that we could put on there, understand the programming and the functions that were going to be done there. We did a fire life safety analysis to understand what that meant, looking at the existing utilities that were underground, looking at the navigational waterway, meeting with National Park Service, meeting with MPD, emergency services, Coast Guard, Army Corps, going through all of that and understanding that to narrow it allowed us to get some of the load down. The Pier 14 and Pier 11, which were out there today, actually were cut down fairly significantly when they were removed as part of the 11th Street Bridge project. They were also where the overlooks are on Piers 12 and 13 would have to get modified as well. There's an existing heavy cladding that's on that existing piers today that's taking up a significant amount of the capacity of the pilings that are there. So we're trying to reuse those pilings by taking off some of that, by taking that cladding off and bringing up columns that open up that area as well. In the area where the new pier is placed on the Anacostia side, Pier 15 that we're talking about, that was originally where the educational center was planned to be located as part of the original concept. That was located along the Anacostia River, and it was in the floodplain. And so it was going to originally have a base on the floodplain in that location in order to hold up that building. By relocating it to the other side of the Anacostia Drive and putting it on that other location, we could open up the floodplain, get that building outside of the floodplain and above the floodplain elevation, which then allowed it for a better access to the bridge park, allowed us to provide the support to augment what was needed for the existing Pier 14, and reconfigured by moving the play space that was off the site and bring it onto the bridge, which allowed it to engage better with the open air space around the cafe, and also to provide a destination point on the east side with the Environmental Education Center.
I just want to, so I'll just say 2 points. As one, I still want to make sure we keep the integrity of that sort of brick wall piece too, because it looks like that's sort of gone away too. That was the original piece. It looks so much like a freeway underpass to me right now that, and we've tried really hard. I know we're activating and there's lighting and all that stuff, but I would just say no one's really figured out how to understand that treatment when it's not a bridge park, and I want to make sure that we really pay attention to the underside as much as we do to all the nice things that are on top, and that we sort of go back to the integrity, I believe, of the competition, which was to take these sort of rectangular, bricky things that were there and incorporate them as something new. This looks like a completely new park. And so I just want to make sure we're being really mindful to the integrity of that one, and then really figure out a way to treat the heck out of the new elements and columns that are there.
Mr. Gallus?
I have minor comments. Are you speaking, though, Commissioner Shaw, to the authenticity of it, that it feels reminiscent of what was there more than it does now to you?
Yes, I mean, so I think even in this rendering, in the previous renderings, it was that sort of brick, almost railroad trellis that was the whole moment. And now, like if you look at that kind of moment was to remind you of what was there before. Mm-hmm. And so now it looks lighter, but the whole purpose was to take these things and put a park on them. And now sort of the original, literally the base of it has now been removed, and we're adding more infrastructure into the community. So I just feel like at some moment we're losing the integrity of why we built it and the things that were really the foundation for it.
Hi, I'm Jason Long. I'm with OMA. Just to reemphasize Jim's point, we're reusing still the piers, of course. It's just the pier caps, which you see here is this white concrete where the kind of laser pointer is, and then basically 11 and 12, as Jim was saying. Those are the two that exist here. The other two have been already cut down,
okay.
And so we would have to have some structure that would come up. And for us, so what we're really doing is adding 2 columns and then revealing structure that otherwise would have been hidden within the Environmental Education Center, which we needed to move, which is the structure that you see on the land side on the east. I think that we definitely share your concern about the importance of the underside of this bridge, but we also think that lightening it up and allowing more views through the entirety of both this bridge and then the vehicular bridges is an improvement. I think that we have work to do to design those columns coming down and the whole treatment of the underside. But
If we can look at, I know it feels lighter, but I would wonder what it looks like to have that back.
Mm-hmm.
I'd just like to say 2 comments. One is, the more that we can have this feel as if it's authentic. I mean, Commissioner White mentioned the High Line as an example. Well, as I understand it, most of the rails that are on the High Line were not the original rails, actually. They were replaced and sort of reflective of what was. And so, but still it feels very authentic. And so to the extent we can do that, I think that would be, and I think in the hands of great designers such as your teams, I'm confident that will happen.
You mean structure? The structure?
I think that, but also reminiscent of sort of these brick walls and so forth that Commissioner Shaw is talking about. And then I just want to say that I'm excited about the kind of catalytic impact this is going to have on both sides of the river here. This is a community that to some degree has been put on the other side for a long time, and to have a memorable and iconic connection to the city that's going to be a destination is very exciting. And so I can't wait to see the next evolution of your work. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. First of all, I would just want to thank Scott Kratz and the Elvin Street Bridge Park crew for everything that they've done with us, with the Park Service, because we've had a really productive partnership throughout this, and many of the actions that have been done to support this effort have actually brought more attention on Anacostia Park. We really appreciate that. I think that's a great benefit of this. It's an and, not an or. So we are very grateful for that, and we are hopeful that that will continue to be the case going into the future. I will say that I am sympathetic to Eric's comments, Commissioner Shaw's comments, with regard to the, what's been lost as the design has evolved. Because the original concept was just to take the roadway and make it into a park. And then, well, the roadway wasn't in good enough shape to support a park, so they stripped it down to the piers. And then now we're even stripping down the piers to just the foundations of the piers. So, I think something is being lost, and I'm hopeful that maybe some of that could come back. And I hope that, it is quite an elaborate thing. I would be very nervous if I had to be maintaining this in perpetuity in the future, because you can sort of see what we struggle with maintaining right there on the slide. But if anybody's up to the task, I think Scott is, judging from the dynamo of energy and enthusiasm and action that he has demonstrated himself to be over the years. So I'm hopeful for the future, but I'm also just generally nervous about stuff. So what can I say? Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Good discussion. Very exciting project. And I live in Richmond, Virginia, and we are looking at, as I think you know, doing something very similar across the James River. So excellent. Is there a motion on the EDR as written?
So
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of the EDR, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you. Thank you very much. And the last item on the agenda is agenda item 5C, and it's approval of comments on the concept design for the Consolidated Communications Center at Joint Base Andrews. It's brought to us by the Department of the Navy. And Mr. Weil, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. The Navy has submitted concept building and site development plans for the new Consolidated Communications Center on behalf of the Air Force. The project is located at Joint Base Andrews, which is in Prince George's County, Maryland. Joint Base Andrews spans 4,400 acres in central Prince George's County, which is bordered by Allentown Road on the west, Pennsylvania Avenue or Route 4 on the east, and Suitland Parkway to the north. The installation has a daytime worker population of approximately 17,000, residential population of approximately 2,600, and is home to various organizations from the Department of Defense, Maryland National Guard, Maryland State Police, and District National Guard. The 25-acre Consolidated Communications Center site is located in the main administration district on Joint Base Andrews, which has a variety of uses, including the Exchange, Commissary, a nearby fitness center, a conference center, and the Jones Building, which serves as the installation headquarters. The site now has a number of older light industrial and maintenance service buildings that are currently vacant since their functions have been relocated to other sites on the installation. Also included in the project limits are the two buildings, Building 1539 and Building 1558, which currently house the various communications operations that will be consolidated into the new communications center building. The project will be implemented in two phases. Phase 1 will demolish the current older on-site service buildings and construct the new communications center building along with its surface parking lot and other various site improvements. And Phase 2 will demolish buildings 1539 and 1558 and return these sites to open green space. The new communications center building is situated near the existing communication functions to allow the new center to reuse existing underground utilities, which would be prohibitively expensive to extend to another further away location on Joint Base Andrews. So here's a close-up of the new consolidated communication center site plan with a proposed 300-space surface lot, mechanical yard in the rear of the building, decorative perimeter fence, loading, unloading access, and landscaping. The plan currently shows minimum 82-foot setbacks from all adjacent parking and roadways around the entire building. Of the 300 new parking spaces, 278 spaces will be reserved for building employees pursuant to Air Force standards, with the remaining 22 spaces reserved for government vehicles, visitors, and ADA parking. The new building will have 2 levels with approximately 98,000 square feet of interior space as shown in the elevation on the slide before you. The new center will be designed to comply with Joint Base Andrews architectural guidelines with a brick veneer, accent bands, and standing seam metal roof, similar to the Jones building, which is shown in the photo at the bottom of the slide, which has a similar architectural appearance. Overall, the project will reduce impervious surface area within the site by approximately 60%, from roughly 15 to 6 acres. Also, on-site surface parking within the project limits will be reduced from a total of 556 to 300 spaces. Staff analysis of the project concept consists of 2 parts: comments related to the project site's overall context and comments pertaining to the site itself. Typically, staff would develop comments based on an up-to-date installation level master plan. However, the last commission-reviewed master plan for Joint Base Andrews is from 1990, which was 27 years ago. The Air Force is currently in the process of developing an updated master plan for the installation, and they will submit the plan to NCPC for review in the near future. However, the applicant has requested concept comments from the Commission in advance of the Air Force's revised master plan submission in light of the Communications Center's project schedule. As such, in lieu of the recent master plan, NCPC staff developed comments for the project based on regional planning policies from our comprehensive plan, with guidance from Department of Defense policies from the Installation Master Planning Unified Facilities Criteria, or UFC. As background, the UFC provides a set of sustainability-oriented planning policies for development of all Department of Defense master plans within the continental United States. And their intent is to promote efficient use of military resources through compact, mixed-use, multimodal development. The UFC sets policies that guide stakeholder involvement, setting goals and objectives, installation-wide network planning and smaller-scale area development plans, and metrics to assess master plan performance. So regarding the project's planning context, the Commission requires an up-to-date master plan to provide future development goals and objectives for the installation so that we can see how the new Communications Center building will reinforce these. The graphic shown before you is taken directly from the UFC to show the type of information that all DoD master plans should include. And it is this information that our Commission will require in advance of the next Communications Center project submission. A high-level street and block plan is required for this area, as well as information on the future street network, street cross-sections, transit stops, and bicycle and pedestrian improvements to help provide the Commission with the site's larger context. And again, this type of information is illustrated on the slide before you with a graphic that is borrowed directly from the UFC. While the project submission states that there is a plan to realign several streets within the area as shown on this graphic, without a more recent master plan, we do not have enough context to determine whether this is advisable or not. Existing parking utilization and future parking facility locations will be necessary to help identify potential shared parking opportunities, and this may allow the Air Force to more efficiently use on-site infrastructure and to reduce impervious area to achieve various DoD sustainability goals. And finally, the Commission needs to understand how the new communications center site will fit within the larger planning district's landscape and open space network, and how the project will reinforce installation stormwater management goals and NCPC policies related to trees and vegetation. And you will see each of these items are requested in the final Executive Director's recommendation at the end of the presentation. The second part of our concept comments pertains specifically to the new communications center site based on NCPC comprehensive plans, and again, using guidance from the Department of Defense UFC for installation master planning related to compact, low impact, multimodal transportation and structured parking. Our first recommendation is that the applicant should consider meeting the new building's parking requirements either through nearby shared parking opportunities or through a new garage, possibly located in the rear of the building, to help better integrate the building site with future nearby development. If feasible, the building should be designed with smaller setbacks due to its location on a secure installation, and this will help reduce the project footprint and allow easier integration with nearby more compact development, with a potential adjusted location closer to the street. The project should install on-site bicycle racks and include showering locker room facilities in the new building to maximize the convenience of bicycling. Reserved carpool, vanpool parking should be identified nearby either on or off-site to encourage multi-occupant vehicle use. The project driveway should be designed with transit in mind to help support potential service on Joint Base Andrews in the future. And to echo a project-related referral comment received by Prince George's County, we're recommending that the project be designed in a manner that prevents adverse water quality impacts to nearby Meeting House branch stream. And the applicant should highlight this in the next project submission through its landscape plan. So with that, here is the Executive Director's recommendation to find the Consolidated Communication Center plan difficult to analyze without an up-to-date master plan for the installation, and to request the following information as part of the next project submission to aid the Commission's understanding of the larger project context. An installation master plan that includes the framework, goals, and objectives for future development on Joint Base Andrews, a street and block plan for the area surrounding the project, a plan that shows the future surrounding area street network with street cross sections, bus transit stops, and bicycle and pedestrian facility improvements, current and future parking facilities to help identify potential shared parking opportunities, and a landscape plan for the surrounding area that reflects stormwater management goals for the installation, as well as NCPC policies related to trees and vegetation. Oops. Next, we recommend that the Commission find the Communications Center plan to be generally inconsistent with the goals and policies from the NCPC Comprehensive Plan and Department of Defense Unified Facilities criteria for master planning, particularly those related to encouraging more compact, low-impact, pedestrian-oriented development and structured parking. And we request a revised communications center building site plan that reconciles the proposed design with these comprehensive plan and UFC policies based on the following recommendations. To use existing nearby parking facilities to accommodate the project's parking requirements, or through the use of a garage on the south side of the building to allow better integration with future area development. To design the site with smaller building setbacks in light of the project's location on a secure installation, to provide on-site bicycle racks and shower locker room facilities inside the new building to support bicycling, to identify reserved carpool, vanpool parking to encourage multi-occupant vehicle use, to locate the building driveway near the building's front entrance for use as a potential transit stop, and to design the project to prevent any adverse water quality impacts to Meeting House branch stream. So that concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer any questions, and we also have representatives here from the Air Force and the Navy as well who can speak to the project or the master plan.
Thank you, Mr. Weil, very much. Mr. Rhodes, we have a lot to do on this project.
I'm sure, certainly the folks from Joint Base Andrews and the NAVFAC folks who are helping to manage the project can answer any particular questions. I do know a couple points that there were a couple prior iterations on the master plan, and they were impacted by changes in requirements and procedures and started over, and a couple fits and starts in the process. But the request for the master plan is not going to be any surprise to Andrews. They understand that, and I think they're positively moving forward to be able to be supportive and responsive to staff, and that is my perception in some communications that I've had. Also, I think the feedback from in the EDR is going to be very helpful to them. While I do not know, in my mind's eye, I do not know that every single one of them will be incorporated into a modified plan. At least, at minimum, those points can be addressed and to represent as to why, if it's not necessarily modified into a new plan coming forward, what the reasoning and rationale is. So that's going to be very helpful to them, and as they are able to move forward and modify. And certainly, I'd leave to them any other comments they'd have to some of the comments that were presented here today.
Before we see if we have any comments, Mr. May, did you?
Well, I had a question.
Yeah.
So just looking at that design and the, when the version of this without the building planted on it, it seems like we're looking at the remnant of some sort of Beaux-Arts campus plan with that arc with buildings around it. Was there actually something there, or is it just, or am I imagining something?
I think the intent of the building layout is to echo the Jones building to the north.
I'm not talking about the design.
Okay.
I'm talking about the existing condition.
Oh, the existing?
The design completely wrecks whatever it was.
Right. Honestly, I don't know.
I'm just curious about that. I mean, it seems like, the reason I bring this up is that it seems there was, and again, maybe I am imagining too much based on the little bit that I can see and the fact that maybe the Jones building and its incredibly large parking lot already wrecked whatever original campus plan there was. But it seems like there was something at some point. There was an intention. And I think that it underscores the comments of the staff that there really should be a bit more comprehensive understanding of the planning, because just connecting, D Street over there, it doesn't, it's not really, it doesn't make a whole lot of plan sense. So, anyway, are you coming to the dais because you know that there was something there?
Yes, David Humphreys, I'm the community planner on Joint Base Andrews. The area you're talking about used to be Building 1535, which was the headquarters building. It was former SAC headquarters that they added on to in the 80s with spokes, and that's why you see the sort of spoked parking lot left. That was demolished when the Jones building was built to relocate, lease services, do some BRAC things, and replace the headquarters. So the Jones building actually now houses all the functions that were in there. That is vacant. In 2010, we had a plan that actually was at NCPC for review and had an administrative campus plan that essentially used the Jones building as one corner, created another corner where the CCC is now being proposed, actually had another structure, and then had structured parking and created a campus. That general principle is still there. We're trying to reorganize it. What happened in 2010 with that plan, budget prerogatives, essentially convinced us that plan was unbuildable, and then the Air Force centralized planning services and are standardizing all of their installation development plans to follow a specified framework. So we're having to rework some of that. But that administrative campus idea of gathering those administrative actions in that area is still a valid concept. What I would tell you, however, is there is no long-term expansion of Andrews that is known to us. So the current installation development plan we're working through is actually a recapitalization plan. No new missions, no new personnel. Essentially, it's a consolidation plan to recapitalize 1950s buildings that are expensive to maintain. And the CCC is one of those buildings.
Okay, well, I mean, just pursuant to the comments that the staff has already put into the report, even just a recapitalization, what was the term you used, recapitalization? Right, so you're basically redoing things, consolidating, replacing old stuff with new stuff. I mean, it's an incredible opportunity to make the campus more efficient and more livable in many ways. I mean, I know this is not where there are people living right there, but it's still, I mean, people spend long hours there, and it would be nice if those hours could be spent doing something or enjoying something more than just a great view of the big parking lot. So, anyway, that was my question.
Thank you. Other questions or comments on the EDR? That's right.
To say, I'm not going to say anything about the design yet, but I sincerely hope you up your game.
In what way?
In every way.
You may want to give him a little bit more to go on.
Well, I mean, it's fine for a like one of those defunct sort of business parks in the suburbs, but I always say this, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Rhodes, I always do this, and I can't help myself, but I feel like these installations sort of get short shrift on the design quality front, and I can't think of a population who deserves it more. It feels really. Can you go to the picture that you have? It's just really pedestrian, and I think that you can do better. No, the one where you have the Jones building, or whatever, the design precedent. I don't even know what to say. It reminds me, we've seen a bunch of these before. I'm trying to think, what's the installation that's really proud of its huge pervious parking lot?
Fort Belvoir.
Okay, yeah, you know them by heart. I mean, my point is it could be anywhere. And I guess I'm bringing my bias to the table because we are just hammered all the time at St. Elizabeth's to be aware of what's around us and to take visual cues from the surrounding context. So I'll leave it at that.
Can I pile on? I mean, add. I just want to say, I think that you made a really good point at the beginning about the importance of superior planning in the context of these bases, and it's not like that's a foreign concept to any branch of the military. I mean, you think about some of the historic campuses, and the ones that are just stunning, and that seems to have been lost when we consider something like this. So, and it starts with a good campus plan. So just laying out the buildings right and giving yourselves the structure to work within, it gives your designers some guidance on how to make the buildings the right way. I just, yes, there's a lot of work to be done. So.
Welcome. You have something to add.
My name is David Wolfwell. I'm with the Department of the Navy. So to your point about the current aesthetic of the building, and I would concur there's opportunity to further develop that. I did want to point out that though, and I know it was in Michael's presentation also, and it's not just lip service, this is compliant with the architectural compatibility plan of Joint Base Andrews. So there is, a document that the A&Es that we've contracted are required to adhere to. So not to say that we can't stretch, that we can't stretch, but also there's a requirement that we have to what the base is already approved and expects to have at that installation.
I guess what I'm saying is even maybe the document needs to be revisited. This looks exactly like what we saw in Belvoir for the it was like a commissary or something.
Post exchange in the commissary.
And so the last thing you want to do, especially at JBAB where it is, it seems to me it's really important. It's always important because, especially on installations, it seems to me people, not this one so much, but Belvoir, people live and work and probably never leave there. So we owe them better. And this could be anywhere. This could be in a suburban strip mall with apartments above. I just think that you've got an opportunity to set a higher bar here.
We are actually starting the process, when am I going? Middle of November. To update the architecture compatibility plan. I don't want to mislead you, though. It will be updated in accordance with corporate Air Force.
With what?
Corporate Air Force, enterprise headquarters Air Force requirements. So I cannot.
Well, there's a way to be compatible and still be really and be better. There is. I mean, compatibility is kind of a funky word. I'm not sure that's such a well-chosen word for either. I'm just ripping you. I'm sorry, but I just think, as Commissioner May likes to say, we're in the forever business. We don't build for 30 years. We build for 100. And that to me puts the onus on us to do as good a job as we possibly can, because if we make a mistake, we live with it for longer, if nothing else. Okay, I'll stop.
Thank you. Is there a motion on the EDR so that Mr. Rhodes can go and work magic? It's been moved and reluctantly seconded. All in favor of the EDR, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. We've had a good day today. Started out with the Eisenhower Memorial groundbreaking, and we will see you next month.